Okay, y'all, we out here in the garden. It's pretty today. It's real pretty. It's like 60 degrees. I'm sitting up under the shade tree, just enjoying the day. The wind's not really blowing. I've checked over everything in the garden. And it's some stuff I've been meaning to show y'all. Aisha sent me some Okinawa spinach and some beauty berry cuttings. And I have those. I have those in the greenhouse. The Okinawa spinach is already putting on new growth. I think I've had it a week, I think. And it was looking good when it got here. And the little beauty berry cuttings had some little buds that were opening, and they seem to have continued opening. So I'm hopeful on those that they'll go ahead and root. We'll see. We'll be patient and see what they do. But what do I have going on out here that we can talk about that I hadn't talked about? Oh, I know. Somebody asked me a while back about root vegetables. They said they were having a problem with their root vegetables not really making the roots, like beets and stuff, not making the actual beet. They were getting the tops, but they weren't getting the actual beets. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, when you talk about NPK, those are the 3 macronutrients that your plants need. Now let me explain macro. You have macro and you have micro. So macro are the larger, for lack of a better word, nutrients, the main nutrients, the most important nutrients. Like in humans, you'll notice on any food label, the macronutrients for humans are carbs, proteins, and fats, right? So you need all 3 of those for your body to find. You need them in a certain ratio. However, there are also micronutrients that you need in a much smaller. And when you think micronutrients, that's going to be your calcium, your potassium, your various different vitamins A, B, C, those type things. Those are going to be your micronutrients. There's some more magnesium. It's a bunch of them. Think about all the stuff you see on the back of on your daily vitamins. Like if you take a daily vitamin, those will be considered your micronutrients. So, but your macronutrients are the things, for instance, protein. You need that for muscles. Not just for muscles though. You also need that in, like, your hair is protein. Your nails are protein. There's proteins in your skin. There's proteins that actually have functions in the cell. So proteins are not just for muscles and things like that. You need proteins for brain health. So you need proteins for those. You need fats to actually, you don't need a bunch of fats, but you need fats to do certain things. Fats are actually essential in the body. And the same thing with carbs, even though everybody, no carb. Okay, carbs are the energy that your body uses right quick. Like when you jump up and get ready to do something, those, now if you lead a sedentary lifestyle, I don't recommend you eat a whole bunch of carbs. But that's that. That's why I said some of these fad diets, they don't tell you everything you're supposed to know, but that ain't what this video about. Your plants are the same way. NPK are the micronutrients they need, but they also need, the macronutrients. They also need micronutrients. Boron, calcium, different things in the soil. I'm forgetting iron. All of those things, your plants need those as well, but they need them in much smaller forms. But they need nitrogen, they need potassium, and they need phosphorus in their cells to complete a lot of the main processes they complete, like photosynthesis and all of those different types of things. So when you're looking at a plant, like for instance a leafy green, the nitrogen is going to grow the leaves. That's the main thing that nitrogen is used for. So that's why you can take collard greens and you can give them fish emulsion or something high in nitrogen, and they really don't need a lot else. They will grow roots and they will eventually flower, but the main thing that you're interested in are those leaves. So that's why they can get away with just nitrogen. Now, here's where I should have looked up the stuff, because I done forgot which one is which. Out of the phosphorus and the potassium, I can't remember which one is which. Phosphorus either has to do with the root growth, or potassium has to do with the root growth. I want to say phosphorus has to do with the root growth, but I could be wrong. And whichever one that's not, the other one has to do with the flowering. So, because I want to say phosphorus is for root growth and potassium is for flowering, but I may have that backwards. So if I have that backwards, forgive me, but just follow where I'm going. If you have a root crop, and let's say that for phosphorus is for the roots, you need to make sure that when you're fertilizing, please don't fertilize with a high, you can use high nitrogen, but you're defeating the purpose. Yes, that beet is going to make tops, but it's going to focus on making the tops. You need to give it the nutrition that it needs to make the roots, which is the phosphorus. You see what I'm saying? And then let's go even further. Once your plants get established, I know we're supposed to be talking about root crops, but let's talk about fruit trees or tomatoes or anything that makes fruit. And a fruit is anything that it encompasses. The seed is on the inside. Like, for instance, watermelon, that's a fruit. Tomato, that's a fruit. Squash, that's a fruit. Peaches, that's a fruit. If you notice everything I'm saying, the seed is encased inside of, usually the part that you eat. But anything that makes a fruit or a seed bearing vessel, that's a fruit. Before you get that fruit, what happens? It flowers. So once again, if I'm correct, that potassium, you need that potassium so that it will flower, and will flower abundantly, because for every flower that you have, that's more opportunity to get the fruit. See what I'm saying? So if you want squash and things like that, you need to make sure, like, I would probably give them something kind of high in nitrogen to get them started good, to get the leaf production good, because you got to have a certain amount of leaves before you can even get to the flowering stage. Then once they get to the flowering stage, you can kind of cut back on that nitrogen some and make sure you're giving them something. You want to make sure you're giving them something that's going to make them flower really well. Same thing with your root crops. When you first start out, it's fine to give them nitrogen when they little bitty seedlings or whatever. But once the tops get good and established, you need to switch over to something that's going to, the nutrients going to give them something so that they can produce those nice good roots. In my opinion, what I do is I always give my stuff, for the most part, even as possible fertilizer as I can. Chrissy, what are you doing? Chris just going off in the woods. Anyway, I try to give them as even a fertilizer as I can. Like, for instance, when you see citrus fertilizer, it's not exactly like, it's not 5-5-5, but it's, what is it, like 6-4-3 or something like that. You get what I'm saying? It's close to being even. If you can give your stuff an even fertilizer, because that'll keep you from buying a million different fertilizers in your garden. One year they put citrus fertilizer on sale, and I used it throughout my whole garden with no issues. On citrus, whether it wasn't citrus, it didn't matter. If the NPK is fairly close to being even, that's what I give them. But you can find fertilizers where there's no nitrogen, and it just has the P and the K. Ooh, cardinal. Hello, cardinal. Anyway, and you can, so if you have root crops or things that you want to make sure grows nice big roots, or and like I said, roots are important in all your plants, because the better off your root system, that's why I just give my stuff something even. The better off your root system, the better your foliage is, the more flowers, your plant's just going to do better overall. But if you're doing root crops, make sure And I'm gonna be honest and say root crops, like for instance, sweet potatoes, what else? Anything root crop, beets, carrots. That's why you see people amending with bone meal a lot, because that bone meal is gonna help those crops really. Because really, sometimes you give potatoes too much nitrogen, they'll just make all them leaves, and when you go to dig your stuff up, you don't have nothing. It's the same thing with sweet potatoes. If you give sweet potatoes a whole lot of nitrogen, you can get a whole bunch of leaves. Now, you can eat those leaves, and if you really want more of the leaves than you do the roots, that's fine. But just know that going in. So, you know, just like my sweet potatoes, I'm gonna be honest, that's the only thing I don't give even fertilizer to that has a lot of nitrogen in it, because a lot of times you won't get very many sweet potatoes. It's better if you give them, you know, something with the P and the K, and not really nothing. You like once the vines and stuff grow up, you almost can just do away with the nitrogen, just, you know, because they'll just do what they do. So, and the same thing with your onions. Your onions are the same way. Bulbing onions, if you struggle with bulbing onions, you want to fertilize them the same way. When they first come up as seeds, it's fine. If you want to give them a little fishy emulsion, whatever. Once they get a nice little top on them, and they little stems is, you know, about 1/4 of an inch thick, you can cut that nitrogen after that. You need to start giving them something heavily with P and K. That's what you need to start giving them. Those, you know, you can almost cut the nitrogen back almost to nothing, because they will establish they will establish the tops and keep the tops, because they need to do photosynthesis. But you really want them putting that energy into making the bulb. About the only exception I can find to that is potato onions, the multiplier onions. They ain't so picky. They're easier to grow. That's why I recommend people grow them over like other bulbing onions. You can grow other bulbing onions and it's fine, but they're not as easy to grow. So don't beat yourself up if you don't get it right the first time, or the second time, or the third time. But yeah, y'all, so be cognizant when you're feeding. Also, make sure that you are fertilizing. When you see these people gardens out here and they look like something, you have to understand they're feeding their gardens. You cannot go through the season not feeding. How often should you feed? Personally, because I make my own fertilizers, and I know that my own fertilizers are going to be weaker per se, but my fertilizers help build the soil. Like, that's another thing I want to touch on. So there are different forms of fertilizer, right? You have things like Osmocote, which is like almost like pelleted, a slow release. You have other things that are kind of granular, like any of the Jobs or the Espoma. Those are granular. And then you're going to have your liquid fertilizers, like your fish emulsion or kelp. They have kelp meal, which is granular, but they have a liquid kelp as well. So the difference between your liquid and your, let's say, solid fertilizers, your fertilizers that you're going to sprinkle or spread or whatever, versus the liquid. The liquid is already in a form, even if it's a water soluble, like for instance Miracle Grow, you put that in water and it dissolves, that becomes a liquid fertilizer. So I'm talking about those too, even though that's in it's a granular form. When you use it, you would use it as a liquid. Those liquid fertilizers, they are in a form, meaning molecularly. The NPK in those are in a form that your plants can readily uptake right then. Those granular and those slow release and all of that, the NPK form of that is not in a molecular form that your plants can take up immediately. There are some processes that are going to happen in the soil to break those fertilizers down and turn them into molecular versions that your plant can uptake. For instance, there's a lot of different versions of nitrogen. You have nitrates, nitrites, and then you have other derivatives where nitrogen is attached to other stuff. It's a bird or Chris. Okay, so your plants can uptake certain forms of nitrogen. Yeah, that was you. And not other certain forms of nitrogen. Okay? So you want to keep that in mind. All of those granular ones, they're going to, Chris, I done told you about plucking me. You know, I'm going to send you down to South Louisiana. You going to go down there with Fiona and Shauna. That's where you going. You going to go visit. Because you in this plucking, we ain't going to make it. Anyway, so understand that even though you throw that fertilizer down that day, your plants, it has to undergo some things in the soil. That's why it's important to have all that soil microbiology. Notice that word again, microbiology. Those are the tiny, the little bacteria in the organism that you can't see. It's very important to have that in your soil, because those are the organisms that take these different things and break them down into a form that the roots can actually uptake. It's not like your roots can just suck up anything. You know what I'm saying? That's why when people get to talking about soil toxicity and things like that, like a lot of people are worried about lead and growing food plants where there's been lead contamination. Let me explain this to you. Lead is such a different element that once it binds with the soil, it's almost impossible to get it to unbind from the soil, and the plants can't take it up. However, they still recommend that you do not grow edible crops in lead contaminated soils, just as a precaution. But it's been shown scientifically that plants their roots cannot take up that lead molecule, so the lead can't be in the food. And it's the same thing with certain other compounds. That's why when people say certain stuff, I kind of look at them crazy, but you wouldn't know that unless you've actually taken some chemistry classes, unless you've taken some biology courses and you actually understand how these things work molecularly. So I'm saying all that to say, when you take those granular, slow release, whatever you want to call them, and you throw them out, your plant's not going to uptake them that day. This is why I make my own liquid fertilizers, because as I'm watering, the fertilizer and the water is being dispersed upon them. They can take it up right then. It's no problem. I don't have a problem with slow release. I do amend. Like I said, I only really buy it if they got it on sale or something. I tend to try to hit the clearance, at the end of the season or whatever, and catch those bags of fertilizer. And I will amend with them. I will amend with bone meal, blood meal. I don't have no problem with none of that stuff. Feather meal, all of it. I'll use it. Manure. But just understand that this is why you must build your soil. If you don't build your soil, it's going to take even longer for those nutrients to even get to your plants, because you don't have the microbiology in the soil to do the work for you. You get what I'm saying? You don't have, those things to help you out. You don't have that symbiotic relationship between the roots and the soil to make that work. And also the beneficial fungi and things like that. You need all of that in your soil. So these people, I see some mushrooms, leave them. They're doing a job. They're breaking down something that your plant cannot uptake. They're breaking it down. They're going to break it down to a level where your plant can uptake it. You know what I'm saying? So some of this stuff people worry about, they're worrying about too much. When it comes to your fertilizers, just be cognizant of, okay, this liquid is going to be taken up faster versus this other is going. So maybe you want to throw your slow release stuff down, but in the meantime, in between time, water with a little liquid. Get you some, make you some of that, make you some compost tea, or make you some, like I said, we rip up all the weeds out of your yard, put them in a bucket of water and let them rot, and water your stuff with that. That stuff will never burn your plants. And not only that, when you make these teas and things, that's a process to where it's basically fermenting, and that in itself has a lot of healthy, good bacteria in that water that you're now spraying on your plants and the soil. And it helps the soil to be healthier, helps your plants to be healthier. You in turn eat those things and it helps you to be healthier. So all of this stuff works hand in hand. And I just want y'all to understand that you know what I'm saying, take care of your soil, and your soil will take care of your plants. I'm not saying don't worry about your plants. I'm just saying it starts with the soil. I really do believe a lot of the things that other people have in their gardens that I never have is because, number one, I work on the soil. Number two, I water and fertilize quite a bit with these fermented teas made out of just, whether it's comfort, whether it's weeds, whether it's whatever leaves I got, whether it's dandelion, I don't care what it is. I snatch it up and put it in there and let it rot. Because I mean, I've told people over and over again, you don't need comfort for that. Collard greens actually work better. So you know what I'm saying, just like when I cut all the tops off them collard green plants, I'm gonna be fertilizer city over here. It's gonna be on and popping. So y'all, if it's anything that wasn't clear or that I left out or that I didn't add or whatever, put it in the comments, ask me in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.